meeting this morning. Sorry for the time delay. We just got so much going on today. But nevertheless, thank you all for coming. We're gonna move around on the agenda today. I'm gonna ask Senator Wiggins if he would to speak to us on Senate Bill 2526.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking this up. So in short, this is really just, it's not really, it is a code section bill. It's before you, and what it's the code sections on is, in a few years ago, we passed the special care facility for paroled inmates where the parole board paroles certain eligible inmates to the special care if they're in need of serious treatment, they're into life. There's some tweaks that need to be made. They're trying to get that program fulfilled and up and running through the various budget meetings. It's been asked of MDOC how many inmates qualify, who they are, and that's being worked on. And so right now we wanted to have this bill alive so we can make the tweaks to make sure that program gets up and running. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. Are there any questions?
Yes, please.
Senator Sparks, you recognize for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What exactly is deficient?
The folks who are running the different facilities, I've requested the special information from them. I think what has happened is that there was some questions about who all qualifies. And let me say, it is nothing to change any of the qualification metrics or anything. It's about there are people that are, when I say people, entities that are interested in having these facilities, and it's trying to get it where the parole board can parole them to these facilities. But it's not changing any of the that we went through of who's required to be there.
And I think I asked a bad question. Is this just the code sections being brought forward? Are there any changes in what's in front of us?
This is just the code sections being brought forward.
Thank you. Sorry, I asked a poor question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, is this a cost savings measure as well as a humanitarian effort for people who are terminally ill or have such debilitating illnesses that they need to be in special care? Because it also saves money for the state. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I probably know the answer to this question because I was chatting with Senator Simmons about it, but is there a scenario in which an inmate who needs medical care gets released, and of course it saves the state money, but then he or she doesn't qualify for that care on their own based on their own personal financial situation, and then we're leaving them without the care that they clearly said desperately need?
Okay, I don't think I understand your question.
So as long as they're in the state's custody, the state's on the hook for paying for their medical needs regardless of their financial situation, correct? But I'm just trying to envision a situation where they get released. Of course, it saves the state money because the state's no longer on the hook for paying for their medical needs. But in a situation where, because of their financial situation personally, they no longer qualify for the health care that they need and that we previously have been providing.
Okay, so, yeah, when the federal government has incentivized states to set up these such facilities because when they're paroled to the facilities, that is covered by Medicaid. And so the people who are paroled to that, their care is paid by Medicaid.
Regardless of their financial situation.
Correct. It's a Medicaid, I'll call it a Medicaid incentive program. Not that we're training it, but it, as Senator Chastanoff said, they needed, it's humane to get them out of the prisons at the end of their life to go to these facilities, and Medicaid picks up the cost.
Gotcha.
And so then entities, includes hospitals, private entities as well, they have these facilities, and then they get reimbursed through Medicaid for the care given to these folks.
Then, well, I guess then was it really, in that scenario, is it really a cost savings for the state? Because if they're still part of this,
The federal government is picking up the tab.
100%, or is it the state still having to pay a
My
state
understanding
contribution?
is it's 100%, but I can check on it.
Okay.
But that's the point, is to a cost savings to the state by getting them to this.
Gotcha.
And reduce the cost of healthcare, which, having handled that budget for a number of years, it is very, very, very.
Because the inmates, are they not eligible for Medicaid?
No. So I can expand on that. As current law is right now, when they are in Parchman, Medicaid, they are not eligible for Medicaid. And so the state, we are paying dollars through the budget to pay for that. And in fact, MDOC has contracted with a healthcare entity to provide healthcare that we end up having to pay, we, the state. There is a push in different states. And the reason that is because the law says, or it's been interpreted to say, that when you're an inmate, your Medicaid benefits pause or they stop. And there is a push across the country that Medicaid would pick up that cost if the states are willing to do that. And some states have done it. So Medicaid would pick up the cost. But then you get into the other argument that because they're in prison and they're not getting because they don't have Medicaid or any other insurance, their health exacerbates and gets worse. And there are studies that show that if you continue to be on that, then they will be in a better position. So that's part and parcel of this whole thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions to Senator Wiggins? No other questions? Motion? Motion, second. I'm sorry. I got a little bit, ahead of everything on this one, Senator Wiggins, so you may have to come back.
Sorry? Oh.
I'll bring it back.
Oh. Okay, thank you. I'm doing what the chairman says. Okay.
Trying to get some of this stuff done.
Thank you very much.
But at least we know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Simmons, Senate Bill 2171. Senator Derrick Simmons, you're recognized to explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. We've had this bill, I've introduced it several years, and we've actually considered it past the committee, also has passed the Senate. Hadn't had much success on the House side. Senate Bill 2171 would allow only non-violent offenders. The operative language on lines 12 and 13, non-violent offenders who have a long-term debilitating medical condition to be placed on conditional medical release. That conditional medical release could only be done if you look at lines 20 through 23, if the actual medical director certifies to the commissioner that that particular inmate is suffering from a long-term debilitating medical condition. We are talking about really, really ill inmates in the system. A lot of them are on hospice. They may have cancer. They are about to expire. The cost for these inmates are astronomical. And so it is a cost saving measure for the department. Also, if you look at lines 35 and 36, the safeguard is this, even though I don't expect this to ever exist if you have someone who is about to expire, if that offender is no longer bedridden or is no longer suffering from that long-term debilitating medical condition, they shall be returned back to the department and placed in physical custody. So this only applies to non-violent offenders who may be suffering from a long-term debilitating condition. And even in that particular situation, the medical director has to certify to the commissioner for them to be placed on conditional medical release. That's an explanation of the bill. Now I yield to any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Simmons. Any questions to Senator Simmons? Senator Sparks, you recognize for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Simmons, they are placed on ISP. That's correct. They're still going to have an ankle monitor even though they're on conditional medical release.
That's correct, Chairman Sparks.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions to Senator Simmons? If none, ask for a motion. House officials do pass. All in favor, let me know by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have one no. Thank you, Senator Simmons. Next bill up is Senate Bill 2444, and this bill is the, work pilot program that was started over at CMCF, that allowed 25 individuals to be released to go out and work on a daily basis and be able to be paid a prevailing wage. We had a joint hearing with the House Corrections Committee, and we had a presentation there from those who would administer this program, and I think all of y'all who were there can agree that this was a success. We got an opportunity to see individuals who participated, take advantage of it, stay out. We only had 2 that went through this program that actually came back, and I think those are some good numbers. But what stood out to me the most was not only with the fact that they took advantage of the program, but these individuals who are still incarcerated are paying down their fines, fees, and restitution. They're saving money. And on top of that, they're taxpayers while they're still incarcerated. I think that is unheard of. We're talking about a substantial amount of taxpayers that went back to the state of Mississippi. And the program had gained so much attention that we've been asked to expand this to our other facilities where we have inmates who are housed, because they understand that there's a lot of people who are taking advantage of a second chance and really wanting to get out and go to work. And we have so many jobs and things that are opening around the state. And so we just think that this is a good opportunity for us to be able to get these individuals out and back into the workforce and to be productive citizens. So basically what this does is just expand this program to all the facilities throughout MDOC that house state inmates. And I'm open to any questions. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a cost to the state in this program, or is it all self-sustaining?
There's really not a cost to the state on this program, because under the old one that we had, 50% of the income was set aside in an account that they couldn't touch until they left from being incarcerated. 25% was fines and fees and restitution. 10% was back to the state for transportation and administrative costs, and 15% they were allowed to keep for things that they could purchase at the canteen. And the only thing that changed was the 10 and 15%. Now 15% will go to the state for transportation, or go to the regionals that participates in this, and then they will only be allowed to keep 10% in their pocket for things that they need at the canteen, which is so that they won't be a burden on their family or anyone else. So it's just been a great success, and again, they're paying their way back. I mean, they're paying for these with 15% of their earnings. So it's just a good program.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There are no other questions. I ask for a motion. Thank you very much. Titles officially do pass. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you all. Next bill is 2448 with the committee sub, and we're going to ask Senator Sparks to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should have a committee substitute. This bill addresses the Parole Act that we passed a couple of years ago. It had a repealer in it. This bill will extend that repealer until 2028. That is all it does, is it relates to the parole bill. Then there is a section inserted on line 129, which is an attempt to fix the Miller v. Alabama problem we have. I understand there are other bills out there that have a very complex, in my opinion, mannerism of fixing Miller, which may become law. But the problem is, if someone is sentenced to life with the possibility of parole that is a juvenile, there is no such mechanism within the parole statute to grant them parole. So a judge would be sentencing someone to an impossible resolution, which I think would still keep us out of compliance with Miller. So this language may eventually be adopted into some other bill that is addressing Miller, but the simple part of it is if you are under the age of 18 and you committed a homicide and you have been sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, that you shall be eligible after serving 40 years of your sentence. So there's at least a mechanism that someone can be considered for parole, because I think we mistakenly interpret the provision that at age 65, you can qualify for early release if you have served 10 years or more of your sentence, because that has been deemed not to be parole. It's deemed to be early release, which would still keep us out of compliance with Miller. So that's the purpose of the paragraph, and Mr. Chairman, I would yield any questions.
Thank you, Senator Sparks. Are there any questions? Senator Hill, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. Senator Sparks, does this include the provisions that were passed in Senate Bill 2795?
This would not include those provisions. All we're doing is putting a parole mechanism. If that even fails, not saying it will, but even if that bill fails, we've at least accomplished a Miller fix by saying someone is eligible after serving 40 years of a life with the possibility of parole sentence if they were a juvenile at the time of the commission.
Okay, so that kind of coincides with the bill we passed in Judiciary A? And I guess-
Indeed.
I guess that's the question I could ask for Senator Fillingame. Is this compatible with what we were trying to do in Judiciary B with the Miller case, do you think?
Yeah, I think after speaking with Chairman Sparks, even with that bill that we had, and I think it's got a reverse repealer in it and still very much up in the air. But even if that were to have passed, because the parole statute wasn't included in that bill, it was almost like you were
Doing
giving
nothing.
them an option that wasn't in actuality an option, because the parole statutes didn't allow for that.
Thank you.
And the only other comment I would make on the bill is I would like the short title to reflect that this extends the repealer, because it says, okay. I'm just on this sheet and I don't want it popping up online as deletes repealer. Okay. That's okay. I just want to make sure that I understand that. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Senator Fillingane, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Sparks, on the 40 years, is that a day for day?
It would be with a life sentence on a capital crime. That's correct. That's I understand it. In other words, you're sentenced under a life with the possibility of parole, that you would only be able to be considered for parole once you've hit that mark, is the way I understand it.
I just didn't know it being a juvenile as opposed to an adult, if that day for day was altered in any way.
Not to my knowledge, it is not. And if it is, please, I'll be glad to work with you to make sure that's
Thank you.
clear.
Thank you, Senator Fillingane. Are there any other questions by any other members of the committee? No question by the committee? Motion,
Title sufficient to pass committee sub.
correct? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes carried. Okay, we're gonna go back to Senate Bill 2445, which is Correction System Program to extend the repealer. And we had in this bill also to extend the repealer to 2028. But because we had added 2 new counties to this bill before, which was Lee and Harrison County, who really hasn't done anything with this program, I'm gonna ask that we add an amendment to the committee sub, which would only extend those to 2026. Okay, we need a vote on on the amendment. Okay. Thank you. Now back to the original. Now, okay. I need to vote on the original bill. Okay, it's been motioned. All in favor? All opposed? Ayes carry. Thank you. The next one on the agenda is we're going to skip Senate Bill 2597. We'll come back to that one at a later date. Senate Bill 2600. Senator Sparks, you recognized to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2600 would establish a study committee to study moving the functions of parole and probation from Community Corrections Division, the Mississippi Department of Corrections, to the Mississippi Department of Public Safety. These probation and parole agents are ultimately sworn law enforcement officers. And to be very, I guess, transparent about my concern is that correctional officers protect the inmates themselves, the people that are in the institutions. Parole and probation are who protect those outside of the institutions. Too often, our parole and probation officers are performing correctional officer duties. And so I want to study this. I want to look at it. I want to see what our problems are. I want to see where our pins are, the number of positions we filled, why we're not filling them, and if they would be better served being at the Department of Public Safety. And there are several things that we can look at. I do want to make sure that we are covering those who are put on parole, those who are on post-release supervision, meaning after they've been incarcerated, but also we would look at the functions covering people who are in intensive supervised program, we're a supervision program, which is ankle monitors, as well as someone who just got a probation sentence. They were never actually incarcerated, but their sentence from the judge is probation. All of these people are monitored by Community Corrections, but that is a basic explanation of the bill. Is we want to study this, to come back and probably make a recommendation next year to enhance our parole and probation system so that it can be more effective in addressing recidivism, but also addressing public safety, because that's what they are on the outside, is the public safety component. That's a brief explanation.
Thank you, Senator Sparks. Are there any questions by any members of the committee? No questions? Council Fisher do pass. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Motion. Senator Hill, you recognize? Yes. Thank you, Senator Hill. But it's also been double referred as well, so. Okay, thank you, Senator Hill. Any other questions? Members of the committee? Not? Yeah, if not, thank you all.